Um, they tend to be a little bit more intuitive, I think, a little safer in the sense that they're built to be a little more restrictive. A Mac, I'm speaking of, in terms of just kind of spyware and a lot of the things we're going to talk about today. Generally speaking, they're safer than a Windows machine, which is a little bit more open, and not easily accessible or problematic from a spyware perspective, but sort of. So both are great. I use a Windows machine. I also use a Mac, so I kind of interchangeably use both. Macs tend to be a little more expensive for sure, but hardware wise, they last for a very long time. And again, they are, I'll say, safer from a perspective of internet browsing and spyware and viruses and things like that. You don't see a lot of that on Macs. They're not an easy target. And then in the phone world, you obviously have iPhone, which is the primary largest market share is iPhones, and then Androids. Two smartphones. That's really it. There's two flavors. There's many brands of Android, Samsung being the largest. But they all run the same operating system, which is the Android operating system. And then you have iPhone, which has, over the last 5 years, iPhone has surpassed Android in terms of market share. So either of those are really the only smartphones out there at this point. Within each of them, though, you can run the same things, right? So you can run an application that is on both iPhone or Android. And the one I'll talk about is like a web browser, right? You can download a web browser on either phone that's the same. And it might be the same browser that you use on your Windows computer or Mac computer. So even though we have Windows, we have Mac, we have iPhone, we have Android, and in many ways, the same applications are available on all of them, and they all kind of feel the same at the end of the day. So it's really just personal preference in terms of what you like and you're used to. In terms of internet access, right? So what do we use the internet for? Email is obviously a big one, but also web browsing, right? So I mean, at this point, I think probably everybody on this call, even to some degree, uses the internet, maybe most days or every day. I certainly do. All of my news comes from the web. I don't subscribe to a traditional deliver paper, for example. Social media is how I keep up with family and friends and things like that. Banking for sure for myself is all done online. Credit card payments. I mean, just kind of literally everything, right? That's many reasons why we access the internet. Well, also similar reasons to why it can be dangerous, right? Because if you're used to doing online banking, for example, that is a place that scammers, right, or fraudsters, we want to call them, are targeting because they want your banking information, for example, things like that. And we're going to talk about all that as we go through this. Also games, that's another huge one. Everything is kind of free these days, right? So online games are free. Everything is ad driven, right? These games are paid for by ad revenue. So you will see in many cases when you're playing games online, free games, you have to deal with ads, or you can pay to remove those ads, right, and to gain features. One thing that is true is with game ads, you can get into weird places on the internet that you don't want to be by clicking on the wrong thing within a game ad, or an ad on any site really. But games are a big one because that's how they actually make any revenue, is by ad selling. But oftentimes you can click on an ad in a game that looks legitimate and seems like you should be clicking there, and you're not really supposed to, and they kind of get you, right? And then suddenly you're in a website you don't want to be on, and maybe asking for information from you that you'd never intended to share, right? So those are kind of some things to kind of just keep in mind when we talk about online anything really. It's ads, but especially when you talk about games and news sites who generate it. The only way they generate revenue oftentimes is ads. Job listings, banking, same thing. So just kind of be wary of when, how, and why you could be targeted. A lot of that is common sense, right? So it's like, think before you click, read the website address carefully, and then when in doubt, directly visit a site or contact through established means. So what that means is, let's just give an example. You're playing a game. somehow you get to a site that maybe is asking you to input your personal information, right? You have to just think to yourself, like, why is that? Why did that happen? It probably is not legitimate, right? So again, it's common sense, right? So think before you click, right? First of all, but if you do get somewhere that you're not sure why you got to a place, it's probably not legitimate, and it's probably them targeting gaining your personal information for one reason or another, or worse, right? So, like, a big part of using the internet safely is just having common sense. You can safely browse the internet and get to places you shouldn't be, but as long as you know not to continue once you're there, or give any personal information, um, close out of that, back up, go back to the site you were on, for example. All right, and when in doubt, this says directly visit the site. So if you click something and you're like, wow, how did I get to Citibank, for example? How did I get here? Why are they asking for my name and address, things like that? Maybe back up and say, is this really where I want to be? Right? Look at this example. Right? This looks like Facebook. I don't know, you guys can probably not see this, right? It's not. It's a different website that kind of is made to look like Facebook. So if you got to this page, for example, you might think, oh, I'm on Facebook. Well, the reality is you're not, and you wouldn't know that unless you looked up here in this top bar, which is the actual website. And so what would happen here is you'd be asked for your login information. And so you could put your login information here on this site, and now whoever is owning this site has your login information for Facebook. And I'm going to assume many of you have at least know a person who may have told you, or you've seen online, my Facebook's been hacked. Please don't, respond to any messages from me or whatever it may be. This is a perfect example of how that could happen. So you get to a page that is made to look exactly like a common website like Facebook. It's a huge one. You log in by giving your information. Now they have on record your username and password. So perfect example of, a scary place that you didn't intend to get to, right? But somehow through maybe an ad on a game over here, you got to this page and suddenly you're turning over your information without even realizing it. Let's talk about safety guidelines a bit. So, how do you protect yourself, right? In terms of just being safe, updating your computer or device. So that's a big one. I'll say it's an easy one because the manufacturers and operating system creators like Microsoft and Apple and Android, they push updates pretty often, and oftentimes they're security updates. That's the largest kind of reason why updates are so common and frequent. Features are also part of updates, but oftentimes it's security updates. So on an iPhone, for example, you'll get a notification that says an update is available. It will be installed like overnight when your phone's plugged in. Typically, that's how Apple does it. I think Android's the same thing. Windows, again, tries to do it overnight when you're not using your computer as long as it's left on. I would encourage you all to always accept those and install them, right? There's not really any good reason I can give you not to install an update for home personal use, especially. In a business environment, oftentimes or sometimes Microsoft will release an update that could break something else, like a piece of software, but for home use, that's not really common. And in home cases, usually you're just using the internet anyway. You're not really using a lot of applications. So keep your devices up to date. It's easy to do these days. These folks want you to update because they want to keep you safe. The software operators, the operating system operators. So I would encourage you all to make sure you do keep up to date on those. In terms of a reputable web browser, right? So I guess whether you know it or not, to use the web, you have to use what's called a web browser. It's really just a piece of software. Natively, when you buy an iPhone, it comes with a web browser called Safari. That's an Apple product that they build, and it comes on every iPhone. Android comes with Chrome, Google Chrome, which is it's a Google product. Google is the creator of Android. and they want you using their product, Chrome. Safari is not listed on here, but Safari is fine. Chrome is fine. There's another product called Firefox, which is unrelated to these guys, but it's another third party. Safe, safe to use, safe web browser. Edge is a Microsoft product, again, safe to use. You should be using one of these, right? We shouldn't be using, there's a laundry list of other browsers out there. There are some other ones that are good that aren't listed here, but I would encourage you to use Chrome. I'm going to give that as my kind of example. That's what I use every day. It's faster, I'll say, than most browsers, but it's also safe, and it's constantly being updated for security reasons. So just make sure you're using a good reputable web browser. In terms of passwords for anything you're doing, first of all, passwords should be unique and memorable. I would say oftentimes, I know it's challenging to always have a unique password, but I typically try to use a name or a word, I'll say, of something that is maybe linked to me in some way, and then append numbers to it, and usually a special character or two. So an example I'll give, it's not a real password of mine, but maybe a car model, a year, and an exclamation point, right? So Honda 2007 exclamation point, or something like that, right? So you want to have a combination of letters, numbers, and a special character. And typically an uppercase or two would be useful too in there somewhere. So, and memorable, that's really the important thing, because oftentimes we forget passwords, myself included. The other thing is, and many of you probably know about this, and if you don't, this would be a good time to learn about it. It's called two-factor authentication. So generally speaking, banking sites almost always enforce this. But so you probably run across it if you do online banking. But basically what it says is you might know the password to get into an account, but we're also going to authenticate you another methodology, right? So it will also say you need to tell us your cell phone number because we're going to send you a text message code each time you log in. And the advantage to that is that if someone steals your password and they log in as you, they can't get in without that code that you'll be sent to your phone, and they wouldn't have access to that because it would be still sent to your phone, right? So let's say that my email and password got exposed, somebody stole it from my bank. They would try to log in, and I would get a text on my phone saying, here's your one-time 6-digit passcode or PIN number. Now, if I didn't log in, I would clearly realize I have a problem, that somebody has my password. But the good news is they wouldn't get in because they don't have the code. I can now log in and change my password, right? So you should kind of always be using two-factor authentication. But in addition to that, if you get a notification of a PIN for a site you're not currently logging into, you're just going about your day, that's a pretty good indication that somebody has your password, and you should go in there and change it immediately or as soon as you can. So that's two-factor authentication. You'll also hear it be referred to as multi-factor authentication. The whole point of it is you set up another means of them confirming it's you. And each time you log in, it's going to also authenticate through that other means. Usually a cell phone text is the simplest way of doing it. There are other methodologies, but cell phone text is easy, and most sites allow for that. Antivirus software. So when we're talking about Windows devices, there is built-in antivirus in these days since Windows 10 or maybe even 7 came out. I wouldn't suggest you have anything beyond that. The built-in stuff is pretty good now. Mac OS, kind of similarly, but even more so. Again, like a much even more safe platform to be on. Not to say it's impenetrable or anything like that, but just generally speaking, Macs are a little bit less targeted because they're more restrictive and locked down. So pretty safe operating system to use is Mac OS. In terms of cell phones, iPhones that are similar to Mac in the sense that they're pretty tightly restricted and locked down. Android's more open. I don't hear a lot of folks getting viruses on their phones, but they do exist. So be mindful, just as you would on a computer, right? Because of the overwhelming popularity of mobile devices, tablets, and phones, they become targets for nefarious folks, right? Because if people are not using computers anymore, they're using tablets and phones, they become the target because there's more people using them. Human factors, right? So social engineering, lying to or tricking a person. So that really comes down to things that, again, kind of look like they're real, but they're not. Perfect example I'll give you guys, a personal example, is many years ago, I was operating a restaurant actually, and we got a call from a phone call, which from what sounded like Pico. And it sounded like they were going to, Pico is a utility company, sorry, electric company. They indicated they were going to shut off the service, and it was like a Friday evening. I was horrified at this, and I didn't really stop to think, well, that doesn't make any sense because the bill's paid. But I didn't, and they had instructed me to go buy gift cards and then give those gift card information to them over the phone. I didn't actually do it, thankfully. I kind of came to my senses while I was thinking through this, but they had lied and tried to trick me right into doing that. And there have been a few examples of this actually occurring that I know of, even within the company, where somebody has done that. And some of the examples are, you get an email that looks like it's from someone you know, but it's not really, and they ask you to do something. Generally, it's buy a gift card of sorts, because once that gift card is purchased, it's as good as cash, basically. So that's kind of a thing. So just be mindful of being lied to or tricked, and you don't necessarily know you're being tricked, obviously. But if you just think it sounds a little fishy, let's say that happened again to me. What I would probably do is hang up the phone and call the utility company directly and ask them. Takes 2 minutes, and I would be able to confirm or deny that person was fake or not, right? So that's kind of what this bullet point is. Always verify the source and contact the company directly. Because if I hung up the phone right then and there and just called Pico, within probably 2 minutes, they would have realized everything was actually perfectly fine, and that was a scam. And so the components of the scam are generally this, right? Create a sense of urgency. We're going to cut your power off, so you better go buy gift cards. Threat of loss, again, turning the power off. Hyperlinks to malicious websites. So if this is a web scam, I'm describing a phone scam. If it was a web scam, oftentimes you'll get a link, right? And that link will look real. But when you hover over a link, I'll try and show you before we wrap up here today. It'll show you the actual site it's going to. So if it says click here to go to, pay your bill at Pico, for example, if you hover over that, and the website it's actually taking you to is some random name, like a random, clearly not Pico, for example, or if let's say it was Facebook or something, that's a pretty good indication that it's not real, and it should be just trashed. Unexpected attachments, unusual sender language, grammar. This is a pretty good, this last bullet's a good giveaway. I get a lot of emails from folks in the company who say, hey, is this a real email or not a real email? And generally speaking, I don't even have to look into it beyond reading the way that it's written to know it's fake or not, right? So if usually they try to, it's called spoofing, right? So someone might want to pretend to be me, for example, John Weibel. So they'll send an email from, they can spoof my name and say they're John Weibel, right? There's nothing stopping anybody from setting up a fake email account with somehow using the name John Weibel on it. And they'll send an email to somebody who works here who might know me and say, I need you to buy, 3 gift cards for Best Buy and send them to me ASAP, right? But usually it's kind of written weirdly. The language and the grammar is kind of strange oftentimes, and it just doesn't make a lot of logical sense. And that's why I say you can usually just kind of, without digging into it too much, figure that out just from looking at the email. Is the person that's sending it to you that it's supposed to be? Is that how they normally talk? Is that how they normally speak and type? Generally, you can kind of, figure this stuff out without even thinking more beyond than just that alone. The other thing I would say is validate it, right? So let's say that somebody like myself asked you to go buy gift cards. Well, maybe just call me and say, hey, I got this email from you to go buy gift cards. Did you really send that? And within a second, I would say, nope, that wasn't me. That's fake. And they would delete the email. We're done with it. All right. So let's talk about phishing, right? So phishing is phishing is called phishing because it's, fishing, like a fishing rod. Basically, oh, am I muted again? Can you hear me, Lonnie? Thumbs up if you can. Yeah, okay. Somebody said they can't hear. Okay, so phishing, right? So it's trying to target people via email, telephone, text message, posing as a real company person to try and get information from you, right? So, and phishing, they're literally sending this to maybe the same thing to hundreds or thousands of people in hopes of a few of them responding with real info, right? Because if you send this thing, this cast your net to 1,000 fish, we'll say, and four give you their info, that's a success, right? So, that's why it's called phishing. And then the information is, of course, then used to access important accounts. Bank information, credit card information, passwords. That's the information they want, right? And so, if somebody comes asking you for any of this, you just have to stop and think to yourself, like, why, right? There's never a situation where somebody is going to email you legitimately and ask you for information like a password, for example. Just nobody's doing that. No bank is ever going to do that. It's just not really a thing. And if you did get an email from, let's say, Chase Bank is your bank, and you get an email that appears to look legitimate, and they want you to log into their site for some reason, right? I wouldn't click the link in the email. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but or validate that it really is Chase's site by hovering over it and seeing what the real website is. But realistically, that's probably not a real email that's going to happen. But if it does happen, go to Chase website directly yourself by just typing it in and logging in. Don't follow the link in the email, because that's just it could be used nefariously to make it appear like it's a real site. It's actually not. So types of phishing are email, and that's just kind of unfortunate at this point. Email is I get hundreds of emails a day because my emails existed for, I don't know, 20 years on my Gmail account. And so it's just kind of out there and people just hammer it. And Gmail is pretty good about filtering out junk, but stuff still gets through. Voice calls. I can't stress how many I get. Probably, I don't know why, but probably 5 to 7 calls a day that are maybe not fraud, but they're spam or phishing, right? And it's really bad. Now, I don't know if anybody else experiences that lately, but in the last 6 months, it's gotten worse. And then text, not as common for me personally, but text is obviously another medium people use to, once again, fish. Other types of scams, kind of more traditional, I'll say, are website pop-ups. That is a big one. You'll go to a free game is a perfect example of where you just see that a lot. You'll be playing a free game online, and there are so many ads in those games because that's how they pay for things, that you'll click on something that says click here, and suddenly you're off into another world, like getting into a place you don't want to be. Unwanted software install, that is related, because in some cases those website pop-ups bring you to places that ultimately ask you to do things like install a piece of software that it says you need, but you don't need, or download this antivirus piece of software, it's actually not legitimate. And they, under the guise of it's going to help you, right? But it's really not, it's really there to hurt you. Websites asking to allow notifications. So you'll see on a lot of sites these days, when you visit them, there will be a pop-up that will say allow or block for notifications. They want you to press allow, because what that will allow it to do is it'll allow you to send you alerts without you even being on the website. I block those in every case, actually, because I don't really want that. I don't need that notification to tell me about a news alert. For example, news sites are pretty insistent on asking you that. But nefarious websites are also asking that. So I would say, as a rule, unless you have a really good reason, I would always block notifications from websites. How to protect yourself. So here are just some real, I'd say, basic fundamental things to do to keep yourself safe in terms of how protecting yourself. So do not click links in an email. That's a big one. There are definitely times where you unfortunately will have to click a link in an email. If you, I'll give an example of that, so I'm not just kind of giving you two conflicting pieces of information. If you go to a website, for example, and they want to authenticate or say that, confirm that you are who you say you are, right? So you log into chase.com. Chase might say, please go to your email and click the link we just sent to you to validate that that's you. And you might have to go do that, and that's real. But if you get an email kind of blindly, randomly from a company, a bank, kind of anyone that asks you to click something, I can't really even think of a time where that's legitimate, right? So unless you're expecting the email with a link, don't click on it, right? It's probably bad. It's probably bad news. Never provide your personal information or passwords, right? There's never a case where a legitimate company is going to email you asking you to input your information, personal information somewhere, right? That happens when you log into a site and it might say your password's expired, right? Put a new one in, that's fine. That's very normal, but it's not, no one's ever going to email you saying, hey, please give me your information. Just not a legitimate mechanism that they use for doing that. And phishing success relies on you providing the sensitive info, right? So it's really, you're kind of like the first and last line of defense, right? In terms of not providing information. And I would say, again, common sense is honestly the most important thing here. It is, you can be 100% successful really and not, succumbing to phishing attempts by just using your common sense. And even if you get to a site, let's say you accidentally click on this link that you shouldn't have clicked on, but you didn't realize it at the time, just close it out. Just close out the site and go back to what you were doing, right? There's no harm in most cases, there's no harm in getting there, but just don't provide the information, right? Just close the site out and be done with it. Providing personal details, passwords, account information, or computer access is a problem, right? So it's kind of multifaceted, right? So the one thing is personal passwords, right? That's an easy one that we definitely don't want to give up. But account information is another one. Computer access, just horrifying. I've heard stories of this where someone asks you for permission to access your computer under the guise of, you have a virus, I need to help you, right? So the types of or the type of thing that will happen is you might get a call on your phone, you're not even on your computer, and they'll say that it's the IRS or something, and there's a problem, we need to access your computer. And they give you instructions on how to give them access to your computer, right? That is something that's very real. It does happen, and it's really bad, because what they'll do at that point is try to get access to anything that any password you've ever saved, any personal information you have saved into your computer, they'll have access to it all at that point. So, beyond providing information, giving them just straight up computer access is not good. Microsoft will never call you to ask you to help you. No one will ever proactively call your phone and say, you have a problem, I need access to your computer to fix it. That is not a real thing. And so if you get that call, just hang up on them. It's good, because 100% of the time it's fake, and it's somebody who's trying to steal from you, basically. And go to the source site directly, the website directly. And that's really as it pertains to, let's say, a phishing email where it says, hi, like, I am Netflix and your account's on hold, for example, right? As you see in the picture here. Well, maybe that's legit. I would say probably not. Your best bet, just go to netflix.com and log in and see what happens, because the proof's in the pudding, right? If you can log into the site that you've navigated to, you're probably fine. You don't need to worry about it. I'll go back to the Pico electric phishing attempt that happened to me. If I just called Pico, I would have been done with it and moved on with my life. Instead, I spent 30 minutes worrying about electric being cut off to a business, right? And that was so silly of me to not do that. But in the moment, you're worried and you want to resolve the issue. And so, but again, going to the root is really the most important thing. Here's an email example. So let's talk about this, right? So do not click links in an email, right? And this, again, I don't want to say that every time you get a link in an email, it's bad. That's not necessarily the case. If you're expecting a link, that's fine, right? If you go to a website and they say, hey, we just sent you an email, can you please go confirm that it's you by clicking the link in it? That's legitimate and that's fine. But if you blindly get an email from a person or a company that it has a link in it for you to click, it's likely not a legitimate email and link. And go to the source site directly. Here's a good example of where someone has sent an email that appears to be this person. And actually, this is an old example. This is he actually no longer works here, but this is a real person that worked at Cherry Hill Programs. The name, but you can see the email is not his email. It's not his Cherry Hill email, I can tell you that. It's a random email at a random company, I'll say optimum.net, that appears to come from this person who, if you saw this person emailing you, you might think, oh, well, that's important. I need to get back to him or do what he says, right? Well, here's what he says. I'd like to change the direct deposit information for my paycheck, right? So that's no good. If whoever received this followed through on this, they would potentially just be turning over their direct deposit, their bank information to whoever DJ Shallow 2 is, right? That email. And this is not fake. This is actually a real email that came in. This is last year sometime. So it's a perfect example of anybody can call themselves a name, but the underlying email account or the email might not be real. It's just something you made up and some John Smith made up online, and he knows this person's name and he might know that you work here. So therefore I'm going to send an email to all the people emails I know of people who work at this company and think that I'm Ed, right? So really good example of a scary phishing attempt. But if somebody sent this to me, I would say, yeah, that's no good. And I can tell you that because this email is random. It's not real. So if one of you guys have a son or daughter and you get an email that says their name, make sure that the actual email is them, right? And you know what? You could call them and say, hey, I got an email from you about direct deposit info. And they'd say, no, that wasn't for me. I didn't send that, right? And at that point, you can just delete it and be done with it. So hopefully that makes sense, but this is a perfect example of what I've been kind of talking about this whole time, which is this phishing. So here's an example of, and this is pretty common these days too, I get these a lot, an email that has a link to files, right? So in this case, it can look pretty legitimate. So here's an email on the right, and it says it's from this person's name or email at cherryhillprograms.com. They sent you some files, right? Like, seems pretty harmless. The note is FYI, get back ASAP with views. And there's a link here. It says get your files. So like what I would do if I received this is say, am I waiting on files from this person? If I am, why are they sending it this way? That's not how we usually operate. So this seems kind of weird. And I'd probably just ask myself a couple of those questions. And at the end of the day, like I would immediately have recognized this as being not real. But if you didn't, this is not real. And I would confirm with the person that whoever this name was, right? We blurred it out. But let's say it was John Smith. I would call John Smith and say, hey, I got a link from you about some files you need me to look at. And they would quickly tell you that, yeah, that wasn't me, that's spam, right? So anybody can make something like this where they put in an email body a real email address, right? And a link to something that's nefarious. Maybe you click this and you go somewhere that somewhere along the line is going to ask for like some login information or something. So this is another good example of like a real email that exists in, even today we see this kind of stuff. And the common sense can hopefully get you to the point where you don't click it and actually give these folks what they're looking for. So the sanity check is, yeah, do I know this person? Sure, I do know this person. Am I expecting files from them? No. And this is, that's not how we normally share files. So why are they, what is this, right? So again, like common sense kind of tells you the answer. Next thing I want to talk about, and this is pretty straightforward, it's just email setup. I would encourage a Gmail account. That's the preferred email that I have used for a very long time. It's pretty commonplace. It's definitely, I want to say it's the largest provider of personal email. So, many of you probably have a Gmail. Many of you probably, if not Gmail, have, I think I see a lot of like Yahoo, AOL even still. A lot of providers like Comcast will give you an email account. I always would kind of suggest that you don't use an internet provider email account as your permanent email account. And the reason I say that is because let's say you have Comcast service right now, right? And you have a Comcast email. You're kind of bound to that email forever when you start setting it up with banking information, things like that. Well, what happens when you leave Comcast? I think they might let you keep it. I'm not sure on that, but the point is, you want to kind of be in an agnostic world of email, and Gmail has no ties to any other service that you have, right? Like a internet service. Gmail obviously wants your email because they want to know everything that everybody's doing all the time, so they can make money on search engine things. But that being said, the product is, I think, one of the best ones, or the best one, and they're pretty good about filtering out spam because they see so much email every day, every minute. They have a pretty good grasp on what's real and what's not, and hiding the stuff that's not real from you. Not to say it's perfect, but I'm just going on to say that it's definitely the one I would recommend. So to make a Gmail account, you open up a web browser. So again, it might be Safari, Firefox, Chrome. I prefer Chrome, but you can use any of those. Go to gmail.com, not search. And I'll talk about this for 1 second here. Oftentimes I talk to people and ask them to navigate to a website over the phone, and they search for the website. So what they actually do is they don't go to gmail.com. They actually search a web browser for gmail.com or Gmail. And that's okay, but it's not. I'm going to try and bring an example up here to show what I mean. You guys see the screen that says you've gone incognito? Yeah. So if I were to want to go to, I don't know, a website, ESPN, right? .com. Oftentimes people will just type that and they hit enter. And now I actually didn't go to ESPN.com. I searched for it. And now I have search results, right? You see how we have these search results here? That's not necessarily wrong, but it's not really what I meant to do. I meant to go to ESPN.com and hit enter. And now I'm actually on the website. So those are two very different things. And the reason why I bring it up is because if I were to search for Gmail, that's not a good example because there's no ads, but I'm going to use some really weird specific examples here. The short of it is, if you search for a term or a website instead of going to the website itself, you're going to have to find the actual link you want down here, right? If someone at home tells you, hey, could you go to yahoo.com? That's where you should be, right? You don't want to be searching for Yahoo and then having to sort through results and click on results, right? Those are two very different things. So I'm bringing it up because when we talk about go to gmail.com, this is literally what I mean. Go to gmail.com and then create an account, enter your personal information, which is the screenshot I have over there, and then follow through the steps, right? And then suddenly you have a Gmail account and you can start using it immediately. I would say, Gmail has been around for 20 years. A lot of times nowadays, at least, people's names are kind of taken because this is a shared resource, right? In the sense that there can only be onejohnweibel@gmail.com, for example. So you might find your name is taken, even your full name. So I would encourage, you can search and you can put in like numbers, right? If you wanted to put in like a birth year or something to try and get one that's as close as you can to your name. So just be aware of that, the fact that it's been around for long enough that a lot of names are taken, even unique names. And then, you know, once you log in, you can go ahead and add your email to your smartphone. Every iPhone and Android has an option just to add a Gmail to it really simply. And then you could access email on your phone. All right, that is actually everything. I think I'm on time, that's good. So I guess good time for questions and answers. So